Hello! Welcome back to Girls Ahead in a Book. Today's topic is why I do not read young adult fiction. And this is a response to Kirsty from the Literary Sisters and her video on the same topic earlier on in the week. Now, I find discussion videos really hard because I like to talk. And when I talk, then I go off on lots of tangents and end up about a mile away from the original point. And while in a normal conversation, the other person can steer me back to the topic we started out on, this isn't a normal conversation. So I've made some notes on my blogging notebook, and hopefully they'll keep us on point, but we'll just have to see. Okay, so my first point is, why is this even an issue? Because it is. Now, when I started my blog, I didn't think anybody would ever read it, and I mean, really, I didn't. So thank you very much for coming. It's nice to have visitors. But what you notice very quickly is the genre that proliferates most across the online book community is YA. Most of nearly all of the big blogs are centred around young adult fiction. When you go on Goodreads and look on Listopia, you know, when it's best book ever, or books that changed my life, or books that really has to have a sequel. The books at the top of those lists are almost without fail young adult fiction. Now, if you don't happen to want to read exclusively young adult fiction, then you have to kind of face the fact that your blog won't get as much traffic. Because like with my blog, most of my traffic, first of all, comes from Catherine Swinford. People Googling Catherine Swinford seem to end up on my blog, which is great, but it's a bit of a fluke. But the second most popular search term that leads to my blog is The Fault Within Our Stars, because I reviewed it last year. So if I reviewed nothing but young adult fiction and just did that forever, I would get more blog traffic. But I started doing my blog for me. So I'm just carrying on writing about the books that I like, because I think otherwise I won't enjoy this as much, and I won't want to do it as much. So basically, that's why it is something you have to think about. The second point I had was, the term young adult fiction itself is such a huge umbrella term. I mean, I get quite a lot of requests from people asking me to review their books, quite often self-published authors. Sadly, I don't have the time to read all of them. I really don't. I mean, I don't even have time to read all the books that are on my bookshelf right now, So I'm not taking books from self-published authors at the moment. But the most common theme of all these requests is that these books are young adult, or they're paranormal, or paranormal young adult, urban, dystopic, fantasy, dark fantasy, whatever. And it's just not my genre. It's not what I choose to read. But within the actual term young adult refers to people who are past the child section, possibly not quite ready for the adult one. But there's so much within that. You've got your vampirish stuff, you've got your high school drama, you've got your historical fiction-y Regency stuff, and the kind of John Green-esque ones, because there's quite a few who are doing a similar thing to him now. So actually that term YA I think isn't quite the right one, because it means so many different things. Okay, my third point is, what did I read when I was a young adult? I was very immature when I was a young adult. I had a very high reading age, but I was very immature. And I didn't like anything that had a romantic subplot. I really didn't. Like when I was about 10 in independent reading, when I was in year 6, I was reading this book, Riddle Me This, by Linda Newbury. I turned the page, all of a sudden, no warning, I felt there was a sex scene. Quite, not like graphic, but it was, fairly clear what was going on. And I was appalled. Also it contained a terrorism subplot, and I don't like that either, so there were a few reasons for me to start reading it. But yeah, I was really looking for books that didn't have any romance connotations. Well, not connotations, because, but I didn't want to really explore those feelings, so I tended to bypass quite a lot of the young adult bookshelf. I read a lot of Discworld, which, there's a lot of those, and they're really funny, and I think I quite liked the sort of fairy tale meets the industrial age kind of thing. And I used to pick up quite a lot of things from my mother's bookshelf, like stuff that, Behind the Scenes at the Museum. I read that when I was about 12 or so, and I really liked that. So I've always read a lot of Kate Atkinson. I read Austen from when I was about 9, because again, it doesn't really go into emotions. You have your marriage plot. I didn't really mind marriage plots, I just didn't like romance. I read Dickens more or less because the books are quite big and I quite like the challenge. I did a project on the Brontes when I was about 13, and I liked those because I really liked Wuthering Heights, because although there was a romance subplot, they didn't like each other. So it was great. Yeah, I was yeah, I'm me. That was the way I was when I was at that age. Okay. That's the thing, was when I was about that age, I remember getting teased by a boy at school who said that I read a lot of romantic novels, which, given I was reading Blood Tide by Melvin Burgess at the time, I just thought was just ridiculous. You know, it was this book, this black book with a huge bloody handprint on the front. It's like, it doesn't even look romantic. Yeah. Anyway. Now, my next point is, what do I think of current popular young adult trends? Now, going back a little way, I loved Harry Potter. Loved it, loved it, loved it. I mean, there's a lot of what I think of as quite positive female role models. Like, they're not just there as love interests, you know. I mean, I know, like, Hermione does end up with Ron, and I know Ginny ends up with Harry, but they have their own characteristics. And I mean, no offence to Bonnie Wright, but Ginny in the film wasn't that strong a character. But she's really cool in the book series, and it's the whole point that when she is just interested in Harry as, you know, being his love interest, she doesn't get much of a role. But when she actually develops as a person, then she does take on more of a function within the story. And the same, I really liked Luna because, you know, she just talked about what she was interested in, came out with slightly strange things, and I related to that. I really liked Hermione because she just was really interested in their books. And sometimes she bore people rigid, but sometimes it turned out she actually had the right information all along, so I related. Not about the having the right information thing, just about the really liking books. Okay, so I thought that was really good because it had some really positive messages there. Now, like I said, last year I read The Fault in Our Stars. I did like that. I did think some of the dialogue was slightly over-polished. And I think that's something you see not just in that kind of genre of fiction, but also, you know, teen dramas, you know. It's not quite realistic. It's interesting, but it's just a bit too tidy. It's the same as the way I liked Juno, but I thought it was just slightly over-polished. And I've had, like, quite a lot of quite serious illnesses within my family, and I sometimes find that a little bit too tidy. That may just be a personal feeling. So, you know, I think I can see why lots of people like it. I liked it, but I mean, it wasn't a 5-star review. Now, Twilight, I didn't like. I was on my year abroad when it came out, and I was in kind of a little bubble of being in France. I mean, I didn't know, like, a lot of what was going on in popular culture for that year. I knew about Nicolas Sarkozy's divorce. I remember being in the English language bookshop in Geneva, and I saw this big display to do a Twilight, and I sort of looked at it. I was like, oh, so this is what the kids are reading these days. But the writing was awful, and even when I tried to read it the following year, there's all these really awful passages. I just couldn't get through it. And I didn't like what I did read, because the same as with the Hunger Games, although there's something more things that I liked about that, I felt there were these very blank female protagonists. And in some ways I wonder if it's like a reaction to the way the media portray women. The magazines are saying, if you don't get this particular eye cream or this or that or the other, then you'll never find a man. And if you don't wax this and that and the other, then you'll never find a man. And in some, Bella and Katniss, they don't know what's going on here. They don't care about their appearance. They don't care about what people think of them, yet somehow these men are falling at their feet, so it's like the inverse. Anyway, that's just my own random observation. But what I really don't like, in a lot of those kind of categories, same like with what I have seen of True Blood and the Vampire or something with Vampire Diaries. Yes, I remembered. It's this feeling that because the guy cares so much, then he may be of danger to the girl. Edward cares so much, so he may suck her blood dry. And Jacob, I haven't read them all, so I'm not totally positive on the details, but I know that some girl in the werewolf community, she's got a scratch from her partner. And I don't like the way that domestic violence is somehow linked to passion, because there's no excuse. And people are reading these books are very vulnerable and to the subliminal messages, and I'm not a fan. Same as how with the Hunger Games, it's a similar thing. It's this girl who's powerless, and I know Katniss, she knows how to use a bow and arrow, but essentially she doesn't have any control over her own life. And I don't like love triangles. I think that's a big thing as well. When I was really little, like really, really little, my grandma told me that if you can't choose between two people, then that means you don't have very strong feelings about either one. And although life can be complicated and there are exceptions to every rule, on the whole I do think that's true. And I just think that they're a bit farcical. Sorry, there's lots of lovely ones in fiction, but no. The dystopian genre, there's a lot of that around at the moment. Now, when I was about 15, 16, I read 1984, George Orwell, I read The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I enjoyed a lot of that too. And I also really liked The Children of the Dust by Elizabeth Laird when I was about 14, 15, some similar kind of age really. I think there's something about that age where you just want to read something like that. And Meg Rossoff's How I Live Now. Now, there's, and those ones I thought were really good, but what's around at the moment, it's not really about challenging authority in the same way as those did, because it's really about challenging big government and the nanny states. So it's more about promoting free market liberalism than it is about, the way it seems to be about how a free market is what we're supposed to aspire to, and about individualism. So it's not actually about the good of the whole, it's about the good of the one person. And I read an article in The Guardian about this as well, actually, that was saying the same thing. And I don't think it's actually promoting as positive a message as people seem to think. I think it's actually quite right-wing. But this could just be my random theory, because I also appreciate that the totalitarian state is often just functioning in the narrative to keep the two young people who are in love apart. But it's just what makes me a bit uncomfortable about it. I don't like it. And I also don't like in the Hunger Games the way every time the Katniss used to go into battle, she had to be taken down to a beauty base 0 and have all her hair waxed off. I don't think that pubic hair can stop, have that. Pubic hair does not have that kind of power. I'm just going to come out there and say it. Pubic hair does not have that kind of power. Okay. Now, the thing is, it's not that I never read young adult fiction. I really enjoyed the Bone season. Can't talk. I really enjoyed the Bone season recently, and that is a totalitarian state. But there are exceptions to every rule. I don't want to sound as if I'm being snobby or judgmental, because I think what's most important is people enjoy what they read, and you could never say to somebody, don't read that. It's about making people think. But the difference to me, what I think I tend to be looking for in good young adult fiction, or indeed in any fiction, is just something that will make me think things over. And the two that I think are really interesting to contrast is the Georgia Nicholson series. Now, when I was at school, that was banned in my school because it was talking about underwear. And we were even supposed to review them for a competition, and then we couldn't because of the underwear thing. But when I was about 20, and when I went to America for Camp America, a girl there, an American girl, she had the full box set. So I read them all, and they were really funny, and many laughs were had. But it's essentially a series about a young girl having a series of pratfalls and making the same mistake with boys over and over again. It's an ongoing joke. And don't get me wrong, I was really happy that she got her, good ending, and that she met Daisy Laugh, and he was great, la 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 la. And I think I even read one of them in French just to amuse myself and to pick up on some more slang. But by contrast, I read the Ruby Oliver series by E. Lockhart, and they're so much better in that Ruby Oliver also makes a lot of really big mistakes around relationships, but she reflects on what's happened. She's having panic attacks because her boyfriend broke up with her and then started going out with her best friend the next day. It's grim. But she can think about her own behaviour and take control. The Ruby Oliver series is saying that, think about what's my part in this. And, being a teenage girl or even a teenage boy, I presume, is really hard. Adolescence is not an easy time. And I'm not going to say it's harder for kids now than it was way back when, because I think there's always been challenges. But a series like the Louise Renison one, although it's funny, I just think that it's not a great role model, this whole idea that you just can't take control of these awful, embarrassing situations will just happen over and over again. Whereas I like the E. Lockhart series that was saying that actually you can take control, consider your own behaviour, spot the patterns, see how you can change things as you move forward. Because it's not moralising, it's not didactic. It's just thinking, okay, well, what can I do differently? And that's what I think is really positive about that series compared to a lot of the other ones that are doing similar stuff, like teenage relationships. But it's not really, not really allowing their central characters a great deal of control. And I think that's what's important. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on young adult fiction. Feel free to comment and tell me what you think too. And this was my video, so thank you very much. Bye bye.